Turn to Mark 4. Mark 4, drop down to verse 35. This will be our text for the day. Mark 4:35. And that day when evening came, he said to them, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd, they took him along with them in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. And there arose a fierce gale of wind, and the waves were breaking over the boat so much that the boat was already filling up. Jesus himself was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And he got up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Hush, be still." And the wind died down, and it became perfectly calm. And he said to them, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They became very much afraid. Look at that phrase one more time. They became very much afraid and said to one another, "Who then is this that even the winds and the sea obey him?" We live in a life where we have a dance of darkness and light that goes on all the time. We learn to navigate it. We've become very good at holding the darkness at bay for a little while, but nobody has been able to figure out a way to create paradise on earth. We talk about getting things right, and sometimes we'll string up quite a few days in a row where everything's right, but always something invades and messes up our plans to keep all the goodness and the joy and the light going on. So no one's found a way to do it. And I'm going to tell you this, if somebody finds a way to do it, I'm going to be checking it out. How about you? But there's just not been anybody do it. You can go to the atheist and you go, oh, maybe the atheists are all happy. They don't have all these rules they have to abide by. The atheists aren't happy. You can go to the universalist on the other end. They haven't found eternal bliss and happiness. And everybody in between is struggling just like you and I, because life itself inherently is a dance between the darkness and the light, between struggle and joy, and between sorrow and happiness. That's just the way this life works. And if in 6,000 years people hadn't figured out a way to change it, I don't think we're going to be the ones. So Hollywood gives us the idea, where you're watching the movie and boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy finds girl again. The standard scenario there. And then in the end, the music rises and everybody's happy and joyful and they ride off in the sunset and they live happily ever after. How many of you remember watching Cinderella? And Prince Charming shows up with a glass slipper. And it looks like, he's not going to find her, but in the last moment he finds her, and there's all the celebration and joy, and then it fades out, and we're left with what? We don't see. 2 years later, she's 8 months expecting. Or maybe it's 4 years later, and she's got 3 kids running around her feet, and the laundry's not done, and he hadn't been home in 2 weeks, and he hadn't been in a good mood anyway, and nothing's been going right. And they're just miserable. Or let's fast forward it even further. Cinderella now is 50-something. She's premenopausal. And she's got a long ways to go to get through all. See, Hollywood doesn't give us any of that, does it? Hollywood slips the glass slipper on her foot. And his eyes light up and her eyes light up. And it's happily ever after fairy tale. Life keeps going after the credits run, doesn't it? Life keeps going after those happy moments. Now, don't want to take the happy moments from you, absolutely not. But then you got to wake up the next day and keep living life. So a full education in life, which I think this is all an educational process, all training is how I usually say it. So you need the light side, you need the gratitude, you need those times where you're truly thankful and gratitude just flows from your heart, which I would argue is the number one most powerful, best, positive emotion to learn to develop. And you can learn to develop it and you can learn to do it on purpose. Now that sounds a little bit odd, but can you be in a bad, rotten mood for no reason? Do you know somebody who's just been in a bad mood week after week, year after year? They just got a bad personality. And you ask them why, they're, no, this is the way I am. Well, then why can't we flip that? Why can't we be that person that is grateful and joyful and all of those wonderful things? We're resting in Christ. And somebody can ask you, why are you always so happy? You go, I don't know, this is the way I am. I think that would be a better default to go to. But you're going to have those. Those are part of life. And then the darkness, of course, those things, you're going to have that too. You just can't sit back in a recliner and watch Andy Griffith all your life and drink sweet tea. It doesn't work that way. So you have a journey, and that's called life. And Christ said, let's go over to the other side. I want to unpack that a little bit later. But we're under the leadership of Christ as we take this journey. And we get into the storms, and the waves are breaking over the boat. The boat is filling, and we start panicking, wondering, oh no, what's going to happen? It's all over. And we're wondering, does Jesus even care? And most of us have been there at some point in our life wondering, don't you care? I'm dying over here. And then he says, sometimes to the storm, hush, be still. And then when we get our prayers answered, sometimes we step back and go, whoa, wait a minute. What's going on here? Now, I will have to give you a little spoiler because I'm going to tell you later if I don't forget. Sometimes he says to the storm, hush, be still. Sometimes he says, don't fear, I'll walk through the storm with you, and you don't get the storm removed. So our governing truth here in this lesson is going to be that the storm is a teacher. And that's the way you've got to look at it. I want you to look at the ups and downs of life as to what is life teaching you. And for those of us who are older, we have to be careful not to become jaded. Because some of us have 50 years of surviving the difficulties of life, and we have been through it. We have gone there. We have cried. We have come out of it stronger on the other side. And we start to get, I don't want to say overconfident, but there is a confidence and a faith that, come on, let life throw it at me. I got this. Me and Jesus, we can handle anything. And then we look at somebody who doesn't have that 50 years of life experience, and they're over there, they're scared to death, and they're just, and it's easy to lose sympathy. But they don't know. They haven't experienced it yet. You've heard me say it before. I'm going to say it again. A 16-year-old cannot have 50 years of life experience. There's only one way to get 50 years of life experience. You got to live 50 years of life. I would add to that, you got to really engage those 50 years. If you live 50 years hiding out, you're not going to get a whole lot. So life becomes our teacher. So darkness is just part of the journey. That's point one. The presence of difficulties does not mean that God has left us. Jesus was still in the boat with them. Interesting, Jesus knew they could have handled it if they'd had enough faith, couldn't they? But they didn't have that yet. They didn't have it figured out. But when life's going bad, it doesn't mean God doesn't like us. All of us have probably been in the hospital room with somebody who's going through a really hard time. And in the depth of their depression, they're like, God must not like me. God must not think much of me. Well, I had a friend that flipped that once. He understood the principle and concept. He said, well, God gives those who can handle it more to handle. And then he paused and said, God must not think I can handle much because I've had an awful easy life. And I thought, that's an interesting way to look at it, isn't it? So just because we're hurting doesn't mean that we're somehow outside of God's will, because our obedience doesn't promise us that we're going to be in bubble wrap and everything's going to be okay. These guys did exactly what Jesus said to do. When you look at the text, Christ said, let us go to the other side. They got in the boat exactly like they were told to do. They started going exactly where Jesus told them. There is no disobedience. There's no rebellion. There's nothing you can criticize them for at that point. And yet Jesus sent them straight into the storm. Following Jesus' instruction can be kind of tough sometimes, can't it? So they did what Jesus said, and the storm still came. Our mistake, we think, if I do what Jesus said, then the storms are not going to come. Well, give me a book, chapter, and verse for that one, please. I would like to know that one. Maybe I could teach that a little bit more. But the example I have is They did what he said to do, and they still went into the storm. And then in John 16:33, he would say, in the world you have tribulation. Where are we at right now? We're in the world, aren't we? Now here's the funny thing. We will whine and bemoan our tribulations. We will whine and bemoan this heat wave. And then go and sit in our AC where it's 72 degrees and go on. But we're going to whine and bemoan the heat wave. We're going to whine and bemoan politics, which men have whined and bemoaned politicians for how many thousands of years? We're going to whine and bemoan the aging of our body and having to wear our readers or get cataract surgery or back surgery or knee replacement and so on and so forth. We're going to whine and think, oh, this is so hard. Okay, if it's so hard, then let's just die. Well, I don't want to die. You mean leave life behind? Well, all I'm hearing is a lot of belly aching and whining and crying. It doesn't sound like you're having much fun. Maybe you need to get on home. And like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to stay here. Well, if you're going to stay here, and I'm with you, you know, is it in our book, Jeff? I'd like to stay here longer than man's allotted days. Watch the fleeting changes of life uneven ways. You know, and I like that idea, you know, and I don't know why we think 100's a magical year, but somebody makes it to 100, we really pause a moment, don't we? Well, they're 100 years old. Yeah. And they had 100 years of tribulation. But Christ said, take courage. I've overcome the world. Now, by that, he doesn't mean take courage. I'm going to make all your problems go away. I think you can take that a couple of different ways. Keep following me through this valley of the shadow of death, and I'll take you to a better place. Or I know how to take this and give you something better out of it in the process. So the valley is just part of the route we walk, the route. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you're with me. This is what we got. This is the journey that we travel. Now, the storm will tell us what the calm weather won't. And this is one of the tricks of taking the struggles of life and starting to see deeper. So comfort lets us imagine a lot of things. We'll do a couple of examples here coming up. Pressure will tell us the truth. So we're going along in life and we've had a nice smooth run for a while. And we hadn't really been faced with anything challenging. And we go, whoo, buddy, my faith is strong. Look at me. I am such a Christian. I am such a good disciple of Christ. You know, we start getting a little too confident. And then the pressure hits. And all of a sudden it's, why, Lord? Don't you even care? I'm dying over here. What, you know? And all of a sudden we found out we weren't as strong as we thought we were. Had we been fully anchored and focused on God, we would have been more like Christ in the garden when he said, if thy will, let this cup pass, but not my will, but thine be done. And get up from the garden and carry your cross to Calvary. And find a certain sacrificial joy in it the whole way along. So we have our classrooms, if you would. Israel had it, and they went through the wilderness. It wasn't 40 years totally of, oh, we're lost. You know, I do kind of like the joke where the women tell it on the men. You go, you know why they wandered 40 years in the wilderness? Because Moses wouldn't stop and ask for directions. Ladies, you get that one, don't you? Some of us men are that way. Well, that's not exactly what happened. I like the humor. But God said, I wanted you to know what was in your heart. And then he would say over in Ecclesiastes, when you're in the house of mourning, he says, the living take it to heart. Because we love laughter. I love Lucy, Leave It to Beaver, Andy Griffin, Red Skeleton. Boy, I'm having to do some old stuff, aren't I? I can't always do the modern ones, right? And we love those times of levity. And I'm not saying they're wrong, but there's not a whole lot learned in it. It's a joyful, restful time. It's a nice little sit down and take a break. Job had his education in the darkness. My, did he have an education. I don't even know how to begin to relate to that man who lost literally everything and all of his family. And some people go, well, but he got it back in the end. Come on, get over that. Won't you already? What did he lose? He lost his children. He lost his firstborn. He lost every single one of them. Now, you really want to tell me after all of your kids get killed, and then years later, after you went through tribulation, you come out on the other side, you get a brand new baby, and you go, oh, this is better than the 7 I lost. This makes up for all of it. You know that's a lie, and I know that's a lie. But because we find Job so hard to relate to, we're looking for a way to push him off to the side so he doesn't count. So I can sit in the middle of my grief and go, nobody's had it as bad as me. I don't want to have to sit there and go, yeah, Job had it worse than me. Listen to the way people talk to Job. And you'll hear, not everybody, but you'll hear a lot of people trying to discredit him. And if it's not Job, listen to somebody else talk about their suffering, and then somebody else in the group start trying to discredit it. Well, you think that's bad. Let me tell you what happened to me. And all of a sudden, they try to one-up each other on how bad they had it. But Job found some experiential spirituality that, again, is hard to relate to. He said, I've heard of you by the hearing of the ear. Okay, that's us now. You're just hearing sermons and a lecture. But Job says, but now my eyes see you. Through his suffering, he came to a whole new understanding of God that he could not have had without his suffering. Suffering are rungs on the ladder that take us closer to God and help us see some stuff that we just simply wouldn't see in the midst of our comfort and our ease. Now, I can sit back and I can think, well, yeah, I get it. And I do get it intellectually. But I don't get it experientially. Bob used to make fun of me before I had a grandbaby because I didn't get it. He knew I didn't get it, and he was right. I didn't get it. I mean, I'm glad people had grandbabies. I think that's a great idea. I see them. They're having all kinds of fun. Then I had a grandbaby, and all of a sudden it was a whole new kind of world opens up, right? Well, on the other end, that's what happens with suffering and struggles when we approach them the right way. Point number 3, your pain has to be felt before it can teach you. Now, I'm going to walk a real careful line right here for a second because I'm not a medical doctor, but I've talked to people in medicine, and so many people in our society, the minute they start feeling their pain, they want a pill to get rid of it. That's not always wise. Did you catch? I did not always. Because I understand how people think. They want to think, well, I'm the exception. It's wise for me. Okay, that's fine. That's where you. But the medical establishment in general on mental health says, that's not good. We need to go through the grieving process to come out the other side. And if all I do is numb it with alcohol, illegal drugs, or legal drugs, then it never had its chance to do what grieving is supposed to do. Pain needs to be felt before it can teach us. And that doesn't mean we pretend we're not hurting. Please don't think that. Maybe we can unpack that a little bit more here. Jesus wept at the womb. Now think about there. He's at the tomb and he's getting ready to raise Lazarus from the dead. And he knows, as we read it in just a couple of verses, he's getting ready to say, open the tomb. And he knows Lazarus is going to come walking out. Why in the world is he weeping? Now, I know scholars have argued that for years, but why didn't he just stand there in front of the tomb? You know how people would do it today. They'd be kind of smug and arrogant. Kind of like, yeah, y'all go ahead and cry. I got this. That's not what he did he? He saw their pain, their sorrow, and it touched his heart. And he felt it. And we know he felt it because he wept. In Gethsemane, he felt the pain. He said, my soul is deeply grieved. His sweat became as drops of blood. So when we talk about being a good Christian, it certainly doesn't mean we're going to pretend that everything is okay and we're going to put on this fake smile and somebody comes up to us and says, how are you doing? We go, oh, just fine. Jesus got this. Or me and Jesus got this, and we short circuit the process because sometimes we need to weep together, as Romans 12 and 15 would say. So our grief is not unbelief, and our tears are not rebellion. They're part of this system that we live in. And if we're honest, we're going to learn how to sit with the grief in an appropriate way. And now what I tell people is usually after the loss of a loved one, I say, look, when you feel like crying, you cry. Just go ahead and cry. I don't care where you're at. I ain't worried about anybody else either. If you're walking through the grocery store and you see their favorite bag of potato chips and that makes you want to cry in the middle of Super One at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, then you cry. You be with your grief. And if it's another time and another occasion, those tears aren't rebellion. Those tears, as they run down your cheek, doesn't say, bad Christian, bad Christian, bad Christian. Those tears say, I was so in love with another that our hearts were connected. And tears are a symbol of that love, not weakness. So sometimes for us who are there with them, we just need to be present. Job's friend did their best work when they kept their mouth shut. Have you noticed that part of the story? As long as they just sat there. This is the part that boggles me. Their culture, I believe it said, double check me, but I believe it said they sat in silence with him for 7 days before they began to speak. Now, I don't know anybody I could sit in silence with for 7 minutes. And they did it for 7 days. And then they opened their mouth and just made things worse. That's what we do. You don't push someone through the valley of the shadow of death. It's a journey. We've got to walk that. And so we walk up and we say, really, we don't mean to be insensitive or cold, but we come to somebody's home, they're grieving, they just got a bad diagnosis, they just got laid off from their job, the plant shut down, whatever it is, and we hurt with them, and we love them, and we want to fill in that gap. And sometimes we don't get the best thing is just to sit there and be quiet for a minute. And let them talk. Let them open their heart. But we've got to say something profound. I think maybe us men are worse at that than anybody else. Got to come up with something profound. I got to fix this thing for them. Well, Romans 8:28 says all things work together for the good of those that love the Lord. Well, in another 6 months, a year, you're going to look back and you're going to go, this is the best thing that ever happened in my life. Well, in 6 months or a year, they may look back and say exactly that. How many of you want that shoved in your face when you're sitting there going, I don't know where my next paycheck's coming from. I don't know where I can even get a job at my age. Nobody wants to hire me. You see what I'm saying? Sometimes in our good intentions, we try to shove somebody through the valley of the shadow of death and out the other side before they even got a chance to take their journey. When all we really needed to do was say, hey, I'm here. I heard a podcaster talk about a friend of his who lost somebody, and he had a unique approach. He understood basically what I just said. He said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to call you every morning at 9 o'clock. If you want to answer the phone, you answer the phone. If you don't want to answer the phone, you don't answer the phone. But I'm going to call at 9 o'clock. And he said a number of days on it, let's say 10 days. And every morning, 9 o'clock, he just called. No answer. Went about his business. Picked up the phone the next morning, 9 o'clock. No answer. Went about his business. About the 9th or 10th day, there was an answer. And the friend had been so comforted just to hear the phone ring at 9 o'clock, knowing he wasn't forgotten in his sorrow. That was it. Isn't that amazing? That's being present in silence and letting somebody work out their journey. not trying to hurry them through their journey. So we get two responses. Grief comes into my life, and this is honest, this hurts, right? And it opens the wound so the wound can kind of heal. That's a good process. Now and then doctors have to do that with a physical wound. And then there's bitterness. I'm never going to trust God again. I don't know why God let this happen to me. And this bitterness is the kid, you know the kid. You've been the kid, right? You know the kid that keeps picking at the scab, and keep picking at the scab, and 2 weeks later it's still red and inflamed, and a month later it's still red and inflamed because the kid won't quit picking at the scab. That's what bitterness is. Bitterness just keeps picking at the thing in a destructive way. Setting with the grief is a constructive way. So we listen to what the pain is trying to tell us. And then we understand Christ has the final say. And when we can make that transition, I'll be as honest as I know how. That doesn't make the pain go away. That doesn't make the hurt go away. But it helps me make the journey through the process that's irreversible in so many cases anyway. So if I start resisting my reality, then all I do is add more pain to it. So what I want to encourage folks to do is you're hurting, and you pray about it. You seek the help you can find. A little line says, for every ailment under the sun, either there is cure or there is none. If there's a cure, find it. If there's none, never mind it. There are some things you can't change. There are some things you can change. You need to learn the wisdom to tell the difference between the two, and then correct what can be corrected and accept what cannot be corrected. You just leave that to God. So we're not just sitting still. We're really growing spiritually in all this. So Paul had his thorn in the flesh and he wanted it gone. I understand that part. God said, my grace is sufficient for you. And Paul went to a new spiritual level that he could not have gone to if God had taken his thorn away. And that's part of the journey. Do I really want to go to that new spiritual level? So trust at its highest level just says, Father, your will be done. You got this. I'm with you. I will follow you through the valley of the shadow of death. So we don't run away from grief when it comes into our life, but we don't build a house in the middle of the valley either. We keep walking with the shepherd and we go through the valley. That's the way the dance works. So don't resist the dance. So I came across this and I thought, this is kind of neat. Resisting the fact that night has come will not make the sun rise faster. Think about that. It won't, will it? When you say it that way, you go, well, duh. But resisting the fact that I lost my job won't make a new job come faster, will it? Resisting the fact that I'm getting older and can't do what I used to do when I was 20 won't make greater health come faster, will it? Resenting the fact that I lost someone I love won't make me heal any faster, will it? So resentment's not the answer. The pain is real. The process is real. The timetable is real. But resisting and resenting and being bitter just makes it harder on who? Me. And what I'm trying to do is get me through the process so I can come out of the valley of the shadow of death. So I certainly don't want to be building a house in the middle of that valley. So God can bring honey out of a rock. And the problem or the challenge here is when we're looking at a rock, what do we see? We see a rock. We're like, ain't nothing going to move this rock, you know. And God goes, no, I got something in here for you. So sometimes Jesus will come along and he'll change the weather, which is really nice. We like that one. And sometimes Jesus changes the person. And it's probably more important that I go through the process where Jesus changes the person than changing the weather for me. So all of us could probably tell times and tell stories of where God has answered prayers. And we'll look back in our life and we'll go, I believe God did an answer right there. And I believe God did an answer right there. And they were good. They were developmental. They built some of our confidence. But I think if we were honest about it, we would probably say, but I grew more in the times where he said, no, I'm not taking your thorn away from you. And then we'd have to do like Paul did. So we get the education of endurance. The testing of your faith produces endurance. And the only way I can get there is by going through various valleys and shadows as life brings them into my life. And that makes us stronger and stronger. And then you find, looking back, usually months later. So let me say again, don't take somebody right in the middle and the grief is new and try to push them ahead 6 months or a year. Don't do that. You would throw a fit if somebody did it to you. Don't you dare do it to somebody else. But when we get there, we'll look back. I've listened to interviews with military people who were unfortunately horrendously injured and lost limbs or legs and life. It just turned their life upside down. And some of them, of course, these weren't interviewed, go off into alcoholism and drugs, and they just squander their life away trying to bury the pain. And some of them went through a very long process, 2 years plus. And the thing that amazed me is when they came out on the other side, and this is when they're being interviewed, they said, looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. Because if I hadn't gone through the crucible I went through, I would not be the person I am today. So let me pull on your memory for some of you. Remember, a long, long time ago, we're going back in the 90s, William Shatner did the series called 9/11. And it was always something that went horribly wrong, but the person survived by the skin of their teeth. And at the end of the segment on that whatever, they would ask them, what their thoughts are looking back. And they would always say things like, the sun is brighter, the sky is bluer. I value life more now than I ever did. They couldn't have got that sitting in a recliner playing Mario. That would have been Mario back in the 90s. So we get honey from the rock, and it will satisfy you. I want you to think about Joseph quickly, and we'll start winding this up. Joseph, when he's in the pit, and he's crying, and his brothers see his tears, Joseph doesn't see himself as the second under Pharaoh now, does he? Or the immediate power under Pharaoh. When Potiphar's wife lies and he's thrown in prison, Joseph doesn't see himself as second only to Pharaoh, does he? But as time unfolds, Joseph is able to say to his brothers who caused him all this grief, you meant evil against me. And they did. But God meant it for good. Now, Joseph just had to decide whose team he was on. So pain doesn't automatically make us wiser. It's a choice you're going to have to make. One person will get bitter, and some people get horribly bitter. And then they get all suspicious and they close down. Another person, they get deeper. They'll become gentler, more compassionate, more understanding of other people's troubles. And they become more useful to God. What's the difference? It's the choice the individual makes. So our point is, the storm is not the final word. What the storm did for the disciples, I kind of like the way it's worded there. It took them from one fear to another. So the waves are coming over the boat, and they're like, we're going to die. Well, don't you care? You can just see, almost hear the fear in their voice. And then you get to verse 47, and it says, and this is after the storm was calm, they became very much afraid. Isn't that interesting? They got exactly what they wanted. And they became very, very much afraid because they had a whole new view of Jesus than they had before they set the boat out to go to the other side. So they had a question, and we do too. In the storm, Do you not care? After the storm, I hope we have that new level of fear. Wow, who is this I'm serving? So we have kind of a pattern here, and we won't elaborate this at all. We'll wind her up. Friday, crucifixion, a lot of darkness, right? Disciples on the road to Emmaus, very dark, everything's sad. But Friday didn't have the final word, did it? The resurrection came. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness didn't comprehend it. The darkness can't overdo the light. The light's there for us. It's our choice. Darkness doesn't have the final word. Jesus does. The question is, are we going to walk with him through the valley of the shadow of death? Are we going to take the journey? And along the way, are we going to have the courage just to ask the simple question, Lord, what do I need to be learning here? Lord, what are you teaching me? What are you showing me? What can I see here that I couldn't see before I entered the valley? Simple question, simple approach, but a world of difference as we progress through it. So let me close with simply this. Are you walking with Jesus? If you are, you stay the course, do what you're supposed to do. If you're not walking with Jesus as much as you think you've been, it's time to change. If we can help you publicly, let us do so. While together we stand and sing.